Hey gang, today I wanted to take you through my process for a heavy metal minimalist style Raptor. I'll make more for other legions, chapters, and factions, and cover theory like lighting and composition all here on this channel. Step 1. Base coats. For the main green areas, I'm using Demonic Yellow from the Army Painter. If you prefer Warhammer brand paint, then Flashgitz Yellow is the most similar. Raptors are a kind of soft, deserty green, like if you made Dusty Pink, but green. To achieve that toned down sandy green, I recommend starting with a yellow like this, and if you're worried, you can use a bit more of a brown tone like ochre, but this might make the top coat look more muddy and less saturated. The purpose of this first layer is to use a colour here that will give a bit of colour to the Nuln Oil wash that we will do over the top. This is so I don't have to use multiple colours of shades on different parts of the mini. I can just use Nuln Oil all over and have a tint underneath to colour it as needed. This layer doesn't need to be perfect, but try and make the coverage uniform. This will help in step 3, as patchy base coats may show through the top coat later. If you want it to be pedantic, then you can do the Nuln Oil just in the places you want it to stay, but I find a full dunk helps with the in-depth coverage for deeper shadows and speed. For the trim, I'm using Gunmetal from AK, but Leadbelcher from Warhammer is also pretty good. We just want a very dark silver here, which will be made a touch darker from the Nuln Oil over the top. You should be careful here, as any spilt glitter paint on the green panels will be easily shown through the shade and through the top coat. If you do go over, make sure to go back with the yellow to cover any metallic mistakes. Step 2. Nuln Oil. This bit does not need to be careful, just slop it on, puddle it in the edges and recesses for dark shadows, and try and do entire panels in as few strokes as you can, otherwise you may get tide lines as it dries. Make sure to properly shake your Nuln Oil for a minute, as I've had a couple times I didn't and it's dried glossy because I didn't mix in the pigment enough with the medium fluid. While this dries, make a cup of tea and think about how nice and soft your green will be, and how well camouflaged your boys will be in nice planty planets, unlike Blood Angels, who would stick out like a traffic cone in a rubber room, which they need to be kept in because they're angsty teenagers with daddy issues that can't be resolved because he's dead. Like this video, subscribe, and potentially become a channel member to get exclusive channels in my Discord where I post photos of my kitten and take requests for tutorials to make. I also stream painting on here and Twitch if you want to hang out and ask questions or watch me be bad at Space Marine 2 or other games. Step 3. Top coats. For the main green, I'm using Army Green by the Army Painter. Warhammer's Lauren Forest is the alternate here. This green is like a dull yellow green. It still has some saturation, but it's not super bright. We're aiming for that classic camouflage colour. If you don't have these paints, then using a more watered down greener or bluer green should be fine, but try and use the undercoat to tint it from underneath more than I'm doing here. As an example of this, you can see my glaze layer in my Iron Hands video. I'm using glaze in the actual sense of the word, not the dumb mini painting meaning of the word. Just using very thin layers to tint the undercoat until we get to the colour we want. This might be easier using acrylic matte medium instead of water, but you should be fine. I watered this down a bit and just did enough layers to make a flat coat. If you do a couple of thin layers, leaving the coverage kind of patchy and uneven, this can look more battle-worn, and you can use those brushstroke lines and patchinesses to help plan out any weathering or battle damage you want to add. I don't really do battle damage, and this isn't a tutorial for that, so I'm keeping it uniform and kind of flat looking. I just prefer it looking super clean and new. On pieces like the pauldron with trim, I call these inside corners for the green. I leave about a millimeter or half millimeter gap between my top coat and the corner crease, so to keep that slight yellow outline from the trim and to save me from accidentally going up the trim wall. Be most careful in the recessed armor, such as on his arm, under his elbow and wrist plate, to not get the top coat color on the perpendicular sides of the elbow plate and extruded surfaces. I'm still trying to keep that millimeter or so border on the inside corners, but don't worry too much where the gap gets too thin, as long as those perpendicular sides stay clean and dark. For the trim, I'm using Natural Steel by AK, or Runefang Silver from Warhammer will also work. This should bring up the silver a little bit from the Nuln Oil. You could skip this bit and just have the null silver, which will leave you with a dulled down trim rather than a more shiny trim. Just if you do that, be a little more sparse on the highlights so they aren't super overly bright. Trim only has outside corners. This means the panel reaches a cliff rather than a wall, so if you use the side of your brush along the top, you shouldn't get overflow down the cliff sides. Try and keep the sides of the trim the dark shaded colour. It's hard to fix this if you spill over, as it is that base colour plus null oil. I also recommend picking a plane to be the top and then keep perpendicular sides dark over the whole mini. Step 4. Highlights. On the green, I'm using Necrotic Flesh by the Army Painter. Warhammer brand Nurgling Green is your closest match otherwise. Here, I'm essentially outlining all my top coat with outside edges, or like on this elbow panel, and sculpted edges in the middle of it. Because we're doing these over the top coat, if you make a mess, we can go back over this later with more top coat colour. Depending on how thin you did the top coat, this will either be fine, or these fixes will make patches where the thin top coat is then too thick. Don't worry too much though, as when they're on tabletop, you will be more than the 5 cm away that you are while painting, so you probably won't see the difference. So go all over and edge up all of the edges. I tend to water down my paint a bit for this, just so I can use a smaller brush so the paint doesn't dry before I put it on the mini. If you find the edges too odd, mix in some top coat to make a more middle ground highlight that you're happy with. This will lead to more subtle edges. This is also good if you're worried that they're too bright. I recommend starting on the middle of the elbow sculpted edge so you can easily erase it with top coat if you want to fix the shade before committing to the rest of the mini. This is probably the bit that took the longest, as I wanted to be careful to not have to go back and fix them and cause patchiness. Though I did do these quite messy and I did have to actually fix them. If you're doing an entire army like this, and I probably wouldn't recommend sub-assembling, but it does help. If you're going into a fully built and glued mini, you only need to do step 3 onwards on parts you can easily reach with a brush. This will by accident make a nice shadowed area behind guns and under arms that will make him look a little more dramatic and lit. However, with the green, it might be a bit much in terms of how much yellow is left showing. With sub-assembly, you can get every surface to look flat and uniform with lighting, so ending with a more cartoony or classic heavy metal result. The only difference this will have to actual heavy metal styling is not doing the highlight lines on the plate surface of the shoulders and knees. This is just personal preference. I don't like how it looks, so I don't do it. For the trim, I use silver from AK to pick out outer edges or corners to highlight, and then a secondary bright spot if I feel like it needs it. Warhammer Storm Silver would be the equivalent. Raptors most often just have the same green mane all over and no metallic trim, but it depends on what company you're painting, and I like to show 2 colors in these tutorials. So try and feather out these highlight spots so you don't get a harsh tide line that can look wrong and glaringly obvious with the metallic paint, especially if you choose to skip the top coat on here. The rest of the owl. From this video, learn the things and put it to use on the rest of the mini. This style is good for quick, consistent minis that look good with only a handful of paints. In total, this arm took me about 15-20 minutes, not including the null oil drying tea break. When I painted the rest of the mini afterwards, it took about the same time as a single arm, maybe a little longer, as it's a very simple process meant to be very fast. So this is my fully finished Raptor in Furnace Marine in this style, with all of his markings free-handed in. You can use transfers, I'm just lazy and I don't have a sheet for him to use. If you do use transfers, remember to use matte varnish over the top to get rid of that shininess. If you need more references, the Raptors cosmetic pack for Space Marine 2 is out on the 30th, I assume, with patch 14, probably. And here is a list of all of the things I used in this video. Again, I will make more videos for the lenses, various guns, and freehanding hacks, so don't panic if yours doesn't look like mine. I don't tend to use transfers, but I can also cover those in a video as well if needed. As always, thanks for watching. Check out my other hobby content or my dumbass gaming content on the main channel. Like, sub, leave a comment how you got on, Discord is in the description, and see ya.